Hey everyone, welcome back to TV Guys, the show that spent all summer doing what we always do, watching TV. I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And you know what, Brian? You know what doesn't happen anymore?
What's that?
Big TV premieres in fall. We don't get that anymore.
That's true. That kind of went away for a while. Yeah. It's funny. Like most of my shows that we're going to talk about are from the era that my mind still thinks of as like, oh, it's current sitcoms. But when I look at these like premiere dates, I'm like, this is like 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It's like early 2010s or late 20-teens or late 2000s.
This modern show that I watch called Friends, yeah, that was in the 90s. No, shut up. That's like a couple days ago. You mean 30 years?
Yeah. Like because I mean, you're right. The whole thing is different. Now it's all streaming services and like Disney Plus, you're going to drop, 6 episodes all at once, or Stranger Things, you're going to get a full season and then wait 3 years for another season.
Yeah, we don't have things like sweeps week anymore.
No.
Sure, shows will premiere in September, but I mean, they can drop at any time. We had new seasons of Cobra Kai and that 90s show drop on the same day in the middle of August or July or whatever it was.
Yeah. I'm kind of addicted to these rewatch podcasts as we talked about, and more of them keep popping up all the time. And on these ones, they actually are going into like explaining, like for you younger listeners, Sweeps Week, and they would actually explain these things that just makes you feel old.
It does, especially the way we're talking now. Like back in my day, we had to wait a whole summer to find out what happened.
Yeah, or like I would always, for a lot of shows, I would wait. I was a bandwagon fan where I would wait till a show was popular. I'd catch up on like the first 2 or 3 seasons on DVD, and then be like, oh man, now I gotta wait a week.
Yeah, I mean, there's plus and minuses because like you get this great show that you watch and you're like, okay, I'm done with the season, but there's this huge cliffhanger. When are they going to have a new season? Oh, 2.5 years from now.
Yeah.
Whereas you only had to wait like for 3 months, but they also had so much more stuff, and you did more waiting too. You couldn't binge a season.
For instance, like the one I mentioned, like Stranger Things. Originally, I think they said 2025, but then the strike, I think, pushed all that back, and I have no idea. I haven't heard any news on Stranger Things season 5.
I haven't. Happening. I think they are still planning for 2025. I think it still is planned for next year to come out.
That seems. I mean, I've heard that it would have had. If that's true, it would have had to have at least already been written by now, and like because it's late 2024. Are they even filming yet?
Yep. And all the teenagers in it are still 13. Sure, they're played by 37-year-olds, but know.
Is it supposed to take place like consecutively, or is it supposed to be like time between the seasons?
There's time, but not as much as the actual time period that there is. Because I mean, they're like, it's still got to be in the 80s. It's kind of like how that 70s show started at like 1977, and then like it was those 3 years for 8 or 9 seasons, whatever it was.
Why wouldn't they have just said like 1970? Because then if you go long, you have a decade before you get to the 80s.
Because they wanted the benefit of like the stuff that was out in the 70s, and then they just didn't think ahead and like, oh well, okay.
See, that's why I like that the Goldbergs played with that. They're like, it was 1980 something, and like you can do the timeline and like the references that they were talking about. Oh, this new movie, Karate Kid, like they don't line up in order as they should, but it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Yeah. So we don't care, right? Yeah. But you know what we do care about? Some amazing TV season premieres. So this episode, you can probably tell from the title, we're talking about what are some of the best premieres of television, and we're not talking about pilots. It's not the first episode. We've canceled all the pilots. We're like a Warner Brothers studio. We're just canceling pilots. No, we are not including any pilot shows, but we're looking at when they came back from break, season 2, season 3, season 4. We're looking at what shows had the best start to their seasons, and we're going to pick out some specific episodes and talk about that.
I just realized I came close to doing a full pattern on accident. I'm just looking at my list. I have one with the season 2 premiere, 3, 4, 5, and 7 of different shows, and that's completely by accident.
Oh, I'm all over the board. I got like 6, 3, 2. I didn't write one down. 5, and then some season.
I have 6, but one of them is kind of more like an honorable mention. I mean, it's very possible we might end up with some overlap. I think there's one that's very likely that you'll have. So,
all right, I think you've got more, so I'll let you start.
All right, I'll start with kind of an obvious one, the one I think you're most likely to have, which will be going to our favorite well of The Office, season 3, Gay Witcher.
You do have the one. Good job.
This is kind of the obvious one, because we talked recently how we thought that for both that and Parks and Rec, season 3 is the best season. And it's not just a good start of a good era of the show or the best season. It in itself is a really good episode. It does what it needs to do, because Oscar needed to be gone for part of the season, so they needed to give him an excuse. They have all of the big moment of the Michael kissing Oscar, and you also have a really good dynamic with starting Jim off in Stanford and introducing us to Karen and Andy in that way, while still having the rest of our characters be interesting.
Yeah, I will say the weakest part of this episode is the Stanford things. I don't mind Jim being away from the office, but the Stanford storylines individually in each of those episodes in the early part of the season weren't nearly as intriguing as what was going on in the office. But it definitely set the stage for the later parts of the season, let us get to know Karen and Andy. Yeah. But I do agree, obviously it's on my list. I agree that the A plot of this is just phenomenal. Yeah. It's like this episode, it's funny that this is my walkaway. This episode is the one that I think confirmed to me how Michael isn't hateful, he's just ignorant.
Yes.
He's really stupid about political and social and being considerate to other races, genders, etc. But he tries his best. And so when he realizes he overstepped it, because he's just this product of his own environment and his own little bubble and never having met a gay man, he tries to overcompensate, but he just does it in the worst possible ways that still is offensive, but he means well. Yeah. And Steve Carell really balances the line of how you do that, because in other hands, it easily could be awful.
Yeah. But also shows just how unfamiliar most of the characters in The Office were with having anybody gay around. Oscar, Angela is being super judgmental, as you imagine. Dwight is doing research by watching gay porn in The Office. And Kelly suddenly finds Oscar fascinating. Kevin just can't stop giggling. It's not just Michael who's tone deaf, but Michael sets the stage by being the boss.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And some of it is Angela being judgmental of it. That's not okay. But some of it is just these guys are so stupid. I can't believe Kevin just is he's such a child.
Yeah.
But one thing that we've talked about with this episode, and that you probably heard, but I'm going to repeat it just for those who haven't heard, is that, the climactic part of it is that conference room meeting when Michael's just trying to affirm Oscar in front of everyone. And he realizes the only way he can do that, because he keeps digging a hole. Finally, the only thing he can do is to just brace himself and give Oscar a kiss. That's how he's accepting of him. And so what you've probably heard is that was improvised. They did a number of takes without the kiss, but then then Steve Carell, not the character, Steve Carell's all right, I want to try this. And so when they're doing it, I don't think people knew. And so Oscar was, in his mind, the actor was saying, oh my God, he's going to kiss me. He's going to kiss me. And so since the camera was focused on just those two, everyone else in the background was just breaking character, but they were able to use that take, because so what if they're breaking character? Camera's not seeing them.
Mm-hmm. But then was it breaking character? Because we also saw the shocked reactions of everybody, and I thought that was real. Or was that afterwards when they did a second take?
That I don't know as much about, because I don't know how many cameras they film at once. I'm pretty sure it was the one where he actually kisses him that we see, and only those two. That was the first time they did it. And then maybe they were also filming with multiple camera setups, because I know that when Rainn Wilson stood up to do it too, that was also improvisational, because Rainn thought, well, that's how Dwight would do it. He'd just follow the leader.
Yeah. Dwight hadn't made that turn, because like later on, Dwight becomes like less of like a butt kisser and more of like, I'm weird and I'm owning it. Like when like with Robert California, when he's like, I'll have the steak and not like the same meal that everybody ate. That transition hadn't quite happened yet. He's still following Michael around.
Yeah. But The Office has a lot of good episodes, obviously. We talk about it all the time, but I mean, there's no season premiere that lines up to this one. I think season 4 had a good season premiere too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, 2 of our main characters no, wait, sorry. Season 5 was the one I was thinking of. That season 4 was fine too, the 4K. Yeah. But season 5 was also good, where Jim and Pam get engaged. Mm-hmm. But yeah, season 3 was just really, it was a strong start to the season and was top of the line. Now, in The Office in season 3, that whole season is fantastic. I'm going to give you a season of a show that the season sucks, but the premiere is miles above anything else that happens in that season. So in the show, we talked about House, that show before. House season 6 starts off, it's a 2-hour episode, and it starts off kind of like it's honestly a full-length feature, because it's 2 hours, and we already have the knowledge of who House is, so they don't have to do the character development of that, but instead they can devote it to his arc of what's going on. See, what happens at season 6 is he starts off in an insane asylum, because the end of season 5 was his relationship with Cuddy, and it just went off the rails, and he drove a car into her house because he couldn't handle what was going on. And so season 6 is the windfall of that. And they start off, we just have Hugh Laurie, and there's a small cameo appearance from who plays Wilson in that. I'm blanking on his name right now.
I'm blanking too.
Here we go. There's a small cameo appearance from Robert Sean Leonard as Dr. Wilson. He's in it for a piece of it, but there's no other of the main cast. This is just Hugh Laurie. And so because of that, we have some good stunt casting. And these are guys before they were big names. His therapist, and probably the number 2 of this episode for billing, is Andre Braugher. Now, he's up to, at that point, was the guy that's like, oh, I've seen him in something before he was Raymond Holt. Raymond Holt. Like, he was that guy. He's like, I've seen his face before. But he, like, when he was in there, I'm like, this guy, I know him. He's a great actor. And he does a fantastic job of trying to ground House. And House early on is all about like his selfishness. Like, that's why he's in the asylum, and not caring about the consequences his actions have on other people. And so we actually see how his consequences hurt people, because he thinks he's right about how to diagnose this other patient who's there. And that patient ends up getting hurt. And Andre Braugher's character goes off on him. And that's when like House is like, okay, I'll actually try and commit to my well-being, and try and consider people.
Who does Andre Braugher play? Is he play another patient in the mental institute?
No, he's his therapist.
Okay.
So he's the court mandated until he reaches this amount of time, and Andre Braugher says, okay, he's been rehabilitated, we can let him go. Until that happens, House has to stay there.
Okay.
But the other fun stunt casting before he was big, his roommate, it's either his roommate or just a guy that he got close to there. He's probably the number 3 of the episode, is Lin-Manuel Miranda. Young Lin-Manuel Miranda is there as like this aspiring rapper. And so they have like this big talent show at the end of the episode where Lin-Manuel is so excited for it. And obviously Dr. House is like, this is not the sort of thing that I'm ever going to give 2 craps about. And so like that Lin-Manuel Miranda kind of like falls flat on stage trying to rap, and then House helps him out in the rap, and it's a nice moment of him being able to go outside of himself. It's a really well done episode that feels like this is a movie, and it's just so well done. Too bad the rest of the season sucked.
I never really knew about Lin-Manuel Miranda until he was big.
Yeah.
Because like by the time he was making guest appearances, like he was on Brooklyn Nine-Nine and he was on How I Met Your Mother, and both those times it was like a hey, we got this big star in our show. So like this is an example of before he was big. So I've never seen something like that, and I know very little of House, but I like when shows are able to do that, like take away a bunch of the cast, and just focus on either the main character or others of the characters, because then you get to really dive in, because you're not bogged down with we gotta just spend 2 minutes finding out what this character's doing, and like you gotta like get all characters covered. It really allows you to dive in, which I think there's a lot of examples of that. So that seems like you said season 6 of House?
Yep, season 6. The episode's called Broken. This is actually an episode. If you've seen some of House before, or you've seen all of House, or like this is an episode you can go back to later. That like you just know enough about House, you kind of get his character, and you can watch this on its own, and it still stands alone as a really good episode, a good character study.
Yeah, and you said that season 6 isn't very good after this, but does he actually have any like development that's ongoing after this? Does he change in a way that keeps going, or does it go right back to status quo?
Not really, because when he comes back that season after he gets out of the mental hospital, like everything's changed for him, and like all the people that he cared about that he was working with aren't there anymore. And so it's kind of that like Andre Braugher comes back for a couple episodes following, when like as a recurring character for early in the season, because he will continue his therapy outside of the asylum. And I can't remember what happens, but there's a certain point when he's like, you know what, your therapy isn't helping anything. And he cuts it off, and he's like done at that point. So he completely regresses by that point in the series, or in the season.
I have to go back and rewatch it, because House is one that I know the premise of it, but I've seen very little of House.
Oh man, that stinks, because House season 4 is really top notch.
Okay, you know what? I'm always rewatching something, so I think maybe at some point I'll get into House, and I'll make that one of my things.
That's okay. Someday I'll have all the time in the world to watch everything I want to watch.
Yeah. Well, since you mentioned it, I'm going to stick on the train of both of having an episode that focuses on 2 of our main characters and an episode with Andre Braugher. I'm going to go to season 4 of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, the premiere, Coral Palms, part 1. This is when Jake and Captain Holt are in witness protection in Florida. It's kind of cheating because it is a 3-parter, but I'll try to just stick to the beginning part of it. Because again, like I think there might be like one quick scene of everybody else back at the 9-9, but it really is, this is the Jake and Captain Holt story, because they are wanted by like this big mobster, and so they have to be in witness protection, and it just shows how they are adjusting to life in Florida and how differently they do it. Because like Jake is always Mr. Cool Guy, like nothing phases me, everything. But when he's out of his element and he doesn't get to be a policeman, like or detective, because you notice like he runs on his job, like that's what gives him his like life force. So like there's a scene where he's sitting in his hot tub in the back, eating a burrito, and Captain Holt's just watching him. Like his burrito falls in the water, and he still is like sobbing, eating this gross wet burrito, and like Captain Holt just shakes his head like, oh, I think it's Larry, because they have fake names. He's like, oh, Larry. Whereas Captain Holt is like, he's keeping his lawn perfectly, manicured. He's on a walking tour with these older ladies that he's friends with, and he's just embracing it. Like both of them want to get back to their lives, but Captain Holt's very much a lot more mature about it. Like, all right, I have to be here. I'm still gonna be myself. Like I'm not gonna just no matter what you call me or what I do, I'm still like the essence of me is who I am. Whereas Jake is just completely lost. It's like I feel like you could use this as an analyzation of. Is that the right word?
I don't know, Tobias Funke.
I knew you were going to make that joke. Analysis. That's the word.
An analysis. This episode also features what's his name, Jorma Tacone or whatever, the other member of the Lonely Island with Andy Samberg.
Oh yeah.
So he's in it as their boss at the, like, it's not a Chuck E. Cheese, but it's, or Dave and Buster's. It's that kind of place.
Yeah. It's the arcade area. The one that Captain Holt wants to get promoted, and they promote Jake instead.
You're right. This is a great episode. It's what sells it is these two being out of their element, and you know these characters, you know who they are when they're in their element. So to see them, I am a sucker for fish out of water sort of comedies, and so being able to see them in a new element. And what I like about how Holt does it is that he really, like, he's acting. He commits to a character, and so the character that he chooses is absolutely hilarious because it's just completely opposite of who he is in real life. For one, I mean, this character that he plays is straight, and so he objectifies women in a straight way, but the way that only Captain Holt can do.
Yeah, he says what he thinks that straight men say. But he's surrounded by straight men at work. Wouldn't he just like, oh, I remember Terry says this or Jake says this? Like, no one talks the way he talks.
No, yeah, Holt doesn't have social aptitude, so to speak. He can be involved in society. He can follow chain of command. He's smart. Yeah. But some of the nuances of societal behavior escape him.
Yeah. His intelligence is almost like if Sheldon Cooper were like more functioning socially.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a lot of dramas on my list because dramas just do such a good job. You know, when you've got like an overall story that they're trying to tell, and they start off with season 1 or episode 1 as they're setting the stakes for what that season's going to be, because that's really what dramas have to do. This is what this season's going to be about. This is our main conflict. Get a little piece of that, and that's going to see you through most of this season. So I'm going to real quick pivot before I give you my other drama, because I just thought of one that I've been watching, and I just got to this season premiere, and I'm like, you know what? This should be on there, and I should have more comedies. And that is in season 3 of the show Archer. The Arch of Darkness, I believe, is what it's called. Give me just 1 second.
Yeah. While you're looking it up, I have one drama and the rest are all comedies.
Got it. I'm sorry, scratch that. It's a Heart of Archness. I knew it was a play on the Archer name and somewhere in there. So this is also cheating. And since you brought it up and cheating, you did a comedy. I'm like, all right, I'll go ahead and do it. The end of season 2 saw Archer witness the love of his life in their wedding. She got thrown from the top of the building because he got married at their penthouse. She's thrown from the top of the building and is killed. And he is just like morose with grief. And so he goes in the interim between season 2 and season 3. He escapes and flees his spy organization and doesn't tell anyone where he's at. No one's able to find him. So he's living somewhere, and they're like, where is Archer? We need him back. And so they hire out a character that's voiced by our lovely Patrick Warburton, a great stunt casting here, who plays Rip Riley, a former ISIS agent. By the way, if you've never seen The Archer, ISIS is the spy organization, not the real life terrorist group. So Rip Riley is the former agent there, but now he does mercenary work. And so he's exactly how you would expect Patrick Warburton to voice a character of, like, he's tough, and this one isn't stupid, because a lot of times he's stupid when he voices characters. Yeah. This one is actually very capable, but Archer, like, will not go back to ISIS. However, right away, Rip Riley is able to overpower him, put him on a seaplane, to which Archer mocks the seaplane relentlessly because the concept of a half plane, half boat is just absurd to him. And so he eventually, like, knocks out Rip on the plane, and he takes over, and the plane runs out of gas because Archer thought it was going to autopilot and land on its own to refuel, because that's what he thought autopilot would mean. And so they didn't have any gas, couldn't find a landing strip. They crash into the water. They get picked up by pirates. And then while they're being held for ransom on the ship, Archer's able to overcome the pirates and kills the captain, who is not just the captain, but he is the pirate king. And so when they get to this land, all the other pirates, after he kills the pirate king, they all bow to him. And the like secretary, so to speak, of these pirates is voiced by David Cross. And so he kind of tells them that, like, you know, pirates actually have a lot of rules, and one of the biggest ones is if you kill the pirate king, you are the pirate king. So in his grief, Archer is going to go ahead and hide out on this island as the pirate king, and then Ray and Lana come to rescue him. The whole 3 episodes are hilarious because it just keeps... It goes back and forth between Rip having an upper hand of trying to bring Archer home and working with them, and Archer just getting deeper into no, I want to be here. I want to wallow in my grief, and it plays really well.
This storyline sounds like it could, depending on the show, it could either go super dramatic or very silly. And I'm guessing it probably does. It toes the line a little bit, probably goes a little more comedic, knowing that show.
Yeah, it's 99% comedy, with the sad undertone of a guy who's in grief. But like, for instance, one of his lines is like, I had to leave and I was grieving. Stop yelling at me. He's like, you've been on an island bartending for 3 months, sleeping with newlyweds. He's like, apparently that's my grieving process.
Yeah. And that... Yeah, you could unpack that in a lot of different ways.
You could.
I was also going to say, when you talk about Patrick Warburton doing a voice, do you mean the Patrick Warburton voice that he does for everything? The Joe Swanson and the Kronk and the everything else?
Except for, as I was like, it's exactly how you'd expect Patrick Warburton. But I'm like, you know what? All of those characters, except for Brock Sampson, are kind of stupid. So it's refreshing for him to play a character that isn't stupid. He's just trying to get a job done, and Archer just through the most chaotic actions undoes all of his plans.
Well, no, sometimes Joe is the straight man to Peter, and then sometimes he's along with Peter, and like Lois is the straight man or something. So that kind of is a shifting position there. Yeah.
All right, what do you got?
I'm going to go with The Good Place Season 2. Everything's great.
This episode has one of my favorite lines of the entire series. Top 5.
Which one would that be?
So you talk about the episode for those who haven't seen it.
Oh, you're talking about... Yeah, okay. Basically, following like... The season 1 finale had one of like the biggest reveals. It was a really cool moment where you realized that the whole time they had already been in the bad place, and that Michael is a demon, and that they were being tortured, like psychologically tortured instead of physically tortured. So season 2 starts. He decided, I'm going to wipe everyone's memories and just start out again. And I'm trying to remember if this all happened in one episode. Is it just in this first episode?
Pretty much the whole first episode is just like the 100 times he resets it.
Gotcha. That I was hoping so, because I wasn't sure if like season 2, the first episode was like one reset, and then episode 2 was the multiple. But no, so he keeps trying to reset their memories, and one way or another, it shows that you can like essentially negate an entire season, because Michael is pretty much the only of the main characters who remembers anything that happened the whole season 1, which a lot of times it's kind of a risky move, because you're like wiping out all character development, but it works because you get the sense that like no matter how many times you reboot, these characters are still going to like find their way to to like their development. They're going to find their way back to the character development and the relationships that they had at the end of season 1. It kind of like plays with the idea that, especially in this universe, there is destiny, and these 4 people are destined to find each other and help each other, no matter like what the different scenarios they are. And of course, the funny thing is, you see Michael rebooting them over and over and over again. Like, okay, this now we're gonna have this person set over here. We're gonna have this person set over here. We're gonna give okay, and now your soulmate is Chidi. Now your soulmate is for Tahani is this random guy who doesn't want anything extravagant to torture her that way. Or pretty much always Jason is the monk, because having Jason be quiet is just the easiest way to make things work. But it just goes to show that these characters are going to be who they are in like every universe.
So looking up, I had a question about this episode. So I looked it up, and both you and I were wrong. I confirmed your wrongness.
Yeah.
So this episode is kind of like a remix, if you will, of season 1 pilot, where it's like they just found out she's in the good place to begin with, but she finds that note that she wrote to herself about finding Chidi. And so she is kind of thrown off by the whole thing. And Michael is trying to recreate everything that happened in that first one, like to kind of go back to what it was. And so the whole goal by the end of the episode is to have Eleanor do that whole mess that she did in the first episode. And instead, it's Tahani.
Yeah.
Who she butts in, and she does the like toast and the drunk toast and ruins everything. And so immediately sets off, this plan is already off to a bad start. Yeah. The first time it went better.
And I love the scene where now that we know what's going on, we can see Michael having like a demon meeting, and he has to explain to them like, no, it doesn't work to have Tahani like be like wake up and be the one who's different, because Tahani thinks that she's supposed to be there. Remember, because it was only supposed to be Eleanor and Jason who know that they're not supposed to be there in the good place. Yeah. So yes, all the multiple reboots, which that is a good part of it, that doesn't happen until episode 3. But this is still a good episode because it proves, like I still say
nice
that.
Save.
Yeah, true. Well, it does prove that you can still have an interesting show without while you completely erase the whole first season from almost everybody's minds.
Yeah. Yeah, what I think is really genius in it is, and this is why I love, weirdly enough, Back to the Future 2, because I love retreading a very familiar story that we already saw, but knowing what we know now with new information, we get to watch it all play out again. And so how does it change? How does it shift? And so we saw that in Back to the Future 2 when he goes back to 1955 and like kind of watching from the outside. Yeah. It's the same thing with this episode, except for instead of some time traveler watching on the outside, we're the ones watching and seeing a little bit behind the curtain with Michael and him kind of talking to the demons and being like, no, this is wrong. And we're seeing like that pullback of them trying to fix it and maneuver on the fly. And we get to kind of root for, okay, what new things are they going to do? And the end of the episode, Tahani jumping in, you're like, that didn't happen. This already is way off. We're in a new timeline. What's going on? Mm-hmm. So good writing. Absolutely.
Yeah. The Good Place, I've never suggested The Good Place to somebody and had them not like it.
Not like the show, or not like you suggesting? Watch The Good Place. I'm scared of you.
Yes, well, that's how I do it. I yell at them angrily. But I've watched The Good Place multiple times because I've watched it with new people at least 3 different times, and each time they loved it.
See, that was me back in like my late high school years, early college with Lost. I watched that first season. I bought the DVDs for the first season. I watched it like 3 or 4 times with new people. And it was always like after Walkabout, everyone's like, what's on the next disc? Because like the first disc was the pilot, the Tabula Rasa, and Walkabout. And Walkabout ends. So like, put in the next disc now. I want to see what's going on.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if you got me into Lost or if I was into Lost before I met you, but yeah, I was hooked pretty much from the pilot with Lost.
By the time we met, it was already in season 3, I believe.
Okay.
It was either starting season 3 or season 3 had just ended and we're starting season 4. I'm pretty sure it was starting season 3. No, it was starting season 4 because season 2 was 2006 to 2007. Season 3 was 8 to 9, and we met towards in September of 2009 or August of 2009.
Hey, actually, you know what? Listeners, as you're listening to this, it could possibly be the 20-year anniversary of the flight of 815. September 24th, 2004 was the premiere of Lost, and confirmed in universe to also be the date of the flight.
Correct. And
this is
one of the
airing at somewhere near there.
The first person that I introduced this show to, that wasn't like part of my family, his birthday was September 22nd. Still is. It hasn't changed, but it was back then too. You know what? We're talking about Lost. I was going to go into a different show. We're talking about Lost, and Lost is one of those shows that knows how to start each season well.
Yep.
The pilot was just phenomenal, great pilot, but we're throwing that out because we're not talking about pilots. But season 2, it starts with that make your own kind of music scene with Desmond in the bunker, and we don't know what's going on. Like, boom, oh, it's on an island. This isn't a flashback. Season 3 is this new character in a book study, and we're like, what's going on here? Then she walks out. Wait, they're in a suburb. Wait, Flight 815 is crashing above them. Wait, it's a suburb on the island. Season 4 was the
flash forwards.
Flash forwards. You're right.
Well,
season 5.
We had the first flash forward at the end of season 3.
Yeah, but season 4 starts us off with Hurley driving through the streets.
Introduces the idea of the Oceanic Six and realizing that this is a new thing for the season. It wasn't just a one-time thing with the Through the Looking Glass.
Yeah, so Oceanic Six, what is that? We have 6 characters. Who are the 6 people that made it off? We know Jack, Kate, and Hurley. Who are the other 3?
Well, even then, we didn't know for sure if it was Jack, Kate, and Hurley, because also, like, we know like Desmond and Frank and Ben all also get off the island, and Walt, and they're not part of the Oceanic Six.
No, they're not.
But that Jack was one of the 6 until later.
We knew, Jack was, because in that episode, we see it cuts to Jack. He's getting ready in the morning and drinking like orange juice, and he's watching Hurley on the news, like, and he even comes in at the end of the episode and tries to talk him out of certain things.
Yeah, true.
So, but I'm not talking about any of those episodes. I'm talking about season 5, the episode Because You Left. Now, season 4. There was some lackluster stuff that happened, in my opinion, as I was watching it. And there's some things I'm like, I'm not a big fan of, and like was waiting for Michael to show back up, and then he finally does after like 7 episodes, and is like, well, I kept saying his name as on the guest list for the entire season.
Here, like, some people didn't. If you're not one of the people like us who notices that, you might have been actually surprised. But it's just, I wish they would have just hidden his name.
Yeah, I think they also announced it too. I think they said, hey, Harold Perrineau is coming back, and I remember that piece of news, and so I was waiting for how he was going to come back, which is a weird for him to not be reintroduced until halfway through the season. It was a weird choice to announce that.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I'll stop derailing you from your episode, but season 5, didn't they keep Jin off off the pictures and stuff until he was premiered? Because season 4, we thought, along with Sun and all them, that he died.
Yeah, and we do know in season 4 we did know that Jin didn't make it off the island. He wasn't one of the Oceanic Six. So, but yeah, and I think you might be right. But what I love about season 5, some of the flash forward stuff is it got a little complicated in season 5 as they're all like trying to get back to the island, because that's season 5 is this group in the future coming back to the island. That's the flash forward stuff. But the past stuff was phenomenal. I was so going back to that same thing that I said about Back to the Future 2 and what I said about Good Place. Season 5 starts off, they're jumping through time, and we're seeing different events that we've either heard about or seen or it's been alluded to, and we're seeing all of these things with our characters because they're traveling through time. So we see Echo's brother's plane crash. We see they get to a point and they look, and they're at a well, and they look over and they see the giant Anubis statue. For the first time, we see that four-legged or four-toed statue is finally completed. And
so we never get a clear shot of it from the front, though.
Yeah, true.
Is this where Sawyer sees Clara delivering Aaron, or is that the next episode?
It might be in this one. I remember a couple other things. I remember Ethan shooting Locke. Yeah. I remember Locke meeting with Richard, and Richard being like, hey, the next time you see me, I'm not going to recognize you. You need to you need to tell me this, or like gave him a code word. I can't remember exactly what it was. And then it goes to commercial right after. He's like, John, you tell me you have to die in order to save everyone.
And
you
that's
have to die.
Interesting later on, because by the end of the season, you realize that Richard did that because the smoke monster, as Locke told him to, when Richard didn't know that it was a smoke monster.
Yeah. It's great writing and great manipulation, but it was like the little bit of lackluster I had in season 4 where I was like, okay, are they going to get my attention back the same way they had for first and second season? As soon as season 5 started and they're doing this jump through time, I'm like, I'm back in this. I am loving this. I'm excited to see. And season 5, and I know there's some differing opinions on season 6, but I thought 5 and 6 were phenomenal. 1 and 2, 5 and 6 were great. And 3 and 4 had strong spots, but they stalled a little bit in those.
Yeah. I'm looking at the Lostpedia. Refresh me. This also brings up, because it brings up the idea that whatever happened. Like, they can't change the past. This always happened, except for the fact that like Sawyer goes and bangs on the door to the hatch that he knows is there, because like Desmond's down there, but he's like, you didn't meet Desmond here, so you can't meet him now. But Faraday was able to meet Desmond and then realized that Desmond is the one that can break the rules.
Yeah, and he did, and that was a great introduction of that concept too. Because
then I think it was. Might have been. I think this might have been either the end of this episode or the beginning of the next one. Is that all of a sudden Desmond wakes up like as if things have changed, and he's like, "It wasn't a dream; it was a memory."
Yeah.
But it was a memory that wasn't happened before, because Desmond is able to like be that chaotic force and change the past.
Yeah, and he realizes, I have to go meet Faraday's mom, and that's how we're going to get everyone back to the island. A great moment. That you're right, that is how that episode ended. Great way to end that episode. But I mean, like, I'm not the only person who thought this episode was fantastic. The New York Observer said this was the biggest event of the week when that episode played. You know what else happened that week? They announced the 81st Oscar nominations, and Obama was inaugurated. So, I mean, pretty big week in terms of news. And some guy in the Observer is like, this is bigger. So,
yeah. It also just dates it, because he said Obama was inaugurated, and we're about to have the third president since Obama.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we have the first second. This is good. This will be the fourth term, but third.
Yeah, but third person, because it was, Trump, Biden, and this will be the third person, either Trump again or Harris. I'm not going to get into politics.
Then it would be the second person.
Maybe second person, but third time. Kind of like, is it Grover Cleveland who's 22?
He was the one, yeah.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, no, it was Cleveland. I was about to say Garfield, but he was the one in the middle. There is a Garfield sandwich with 2 pieces of Cleveland bread.
Yeah.
That was the one. There you go. History lesson for you guys.
Yeah. But this is not a politics podcast, because I am not educated enough for that. I will just admit that.
You're the problem, Brian. You're the reason. If you knew more about politics, none of this crap would be happening.
Also, I just realized it's probably my turn. So let's talk about Lost. Well, why don't we stick with the only drama I have, and it's just the same era, and some call it the spiritual twin of Lost, based on a lot of the same cast, which is 24, day 5. 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., which is what the episode's technically called. It's the first episode of the 5th season of 24, which I still maintain that's my favorite season of 24. And each season is kind of like its own little mini movie. And season 5 is the one that starts out literally with a bang, with David Palmer being shot dead like within the first 5 minutes. And because between seasons, Jack had faked his death and gone into hiding, and what pulls him out of hiding was Palmer dies, and there's an attack on Tony and Michelle that kills Michelle. Tony's in critical condition. He just he barely manages to make it to Chloe, and it realizes that, okay, the 4 people who knew I was alive are all being targeted, and that is being used to draw him out of hiding. So then it becomes the whole thing of like, who else knew that Jack was alive? How did they know that Jack was alive? Why is Palmer being killed? And the whole thing was all about Palmer being killed and Jack being set up as the scapegoat. And basically the rest of them, Tony and Michelle, basically just being collateral damage. And it just sets up this whole dynamic because season 4, I thought, had a little bit of a lackluster because you lost a bunch of your cast and it kind of getting used to the new cast. And now with not only this all happening, but also everybody reacting to the fact that Jack's alive while in the midst of trying to figure out what's happening. Yeah. At this time, Survivor was a big show at this time, and this was a big event. They probably aired a couple episodes at once here, but just to have it come out with a bang and okay, you're killing off characters, you're bringing other characters back. What's going to happen with this? It set itself up to be interesting.
Yeah, I never thought of spiritual successor or not, whatever you called it, because I didn't watch it too much, so there's a lot of overlap of cast.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of people. Michelle, Michelle from 24 was she was Horace's wife in the old Dharma days, or Jin was an agent in a couple of seasons. There's a whole list of people. Desmond was a spy in one of the seasons. There's a lot of people who were in both shows.
You know who else Desmond played at one point?
Was that
Jesus?
He did?
Yeah. Fit. Henry Ian Cusack was in, I think it's the Gospel of John, I think is what it's called, but he played Jesus at one point.
Oh, Charles Widmore was the vice president.
Charles Widmore, he pipes up. See, for me, when I think of cast overlap, I think of Once Upon a Time. Now, I don't have any Once Upon a Time episodes on here, but it was similar, because I think that was another Lindelof and Carlton Cuse show. And so, Jorge Garcia's in it, a guy who played Widmore. There's a lot more than what I just said. I just blanked. But this was a show that I'm watching. I'm like, hey, guy from Lost. Hey, guy from Claire is in it from Lost. Emily Ravine, whatever.
Yeah, Emily DeRavin, or yeah.
Yeah.
Did you watch 24?
I watched a season of it.
Okay, so you probably don't remember what I'm talking about then.
I didn't get to season 5. I also, when it was airing, I watched one season finale. I think it was season 5's season finale where Jack gets arrested, which is probably all of them. But was stopping an assassination attempt or something, or a bomb. I think it was a nuclear bomb going off. He kidnapped someone. Maybe it was I think he kidnapped a evil president and to stop a bomb going off.
This season is the one where the current U.S. president was basically arrested for treason at the end. They had to prove that he was guilty. He was colluding with Russia to set off a bomb and start a war treaty. I forget I haven't rewatched it, but the thing was that David Palmer, who had been the big good guy president and was a former president at this point, found out about this conspiracy, and so they took him out because before he could do anything about it. And then they knew you can't just kill a former president, you have to find some out to get away with it. And that's why they decided to frame Jack by killing the 3 people who knew besides Palmer that he was alive.
And you say you're not political.
Yeah. Oh, if we're talking about fake politics, yeah.
I voted for Pamer on his stances. I thought he had really good immigration and economic standpoints, but yeah. Wait, his foreign policy was okay.
Was I not supposed to vote for Kanye last time?
You weren't, no.
Okay.
You can vote for him this time, though. Feel free.
I still can't believe he was actually on the ballot.
Yeah. Wasn't it? I thought there was someone that there was one state they were on the ballot this year, some other pop icon or something like that. Not Justin Bieber, but that type. Something, I don't know. Maybe I'm stupid. Maybe. But let's keep talking about politics, because I have a show that we don't talk about much on here because it's been a while, and also because there are certain reasons that left a bad taste in people's mouth. But one of the first big shows for Netflix was House of Cards.
Oh, yep. I know where you're
And
going.
season 1 was really strong, and it was a great introduction to the concept of what was going on, because Kevin Spacey, he plays this whip in Congress, and so he was trying to whip votes early on in season 1. He was like not only whipping votes, but also whipping them in a way to try and put himself into a high position. And so right away, the show starts off where he was promised a position like a vice presidency or something like that. And he didn't get it, or like a cabinet position, and he didn't get it. And it went to someone else. And when that was being announced, he turns to the camera, because he's a fourth wall breaking character. And he's like, I'm going to bring this whole thing. That's the whole House of Cards idea. He's like, I'm no longer playing the game. I'm going to play my own game, and I'm going to sabotage this to get to what I should have been promised. And so that was all season 1. He does some duplicitous stuff. He sleeps with a reporter and kind of like feeds her stories so that against his opponents. And then he gets a guy killed, a congressman killed, after he does is going to go back on a deal that he wanted him to do or push forward. And so season 2 comes out, and this reporter, who was a main character of the first season, I think she knows about the murder he committed. And so I can't remember all the details of it, but it's like there's a little bit of this, okay, how is he going to elude her now when she knows a little bit more, and maybe she's a little bit more independent than she was in season 1, where she's not just going to print something because he says so, and she might be against him. Well, middle of the episode, main character, he pushes her in front of a train and she dies. They kill off this main character halfway through the first episode of season 2, which the episode is called Chapter 14 because they're very original in their titles. Every season was 13 episodes, and every episode was chapter, whatever episode it was. So he kills her off in the middle of this episode, and he talks with his wife about it, and like he doesn't tell her what happens, but she kind of alludes to, like, knows this girl's a problem, and she's like, well, do what you have to do, sort of thing. And so kind of gives this new idea of like, we all put it on Frank, on Kevin Spacey's character, that he was the evil one, but his wife is just as maneuvering, just as calculating, and those two together, what's going to happen? Well, it gets to the end of the episode, and Kevin Spacey's looking in a mirror, and then he looks at the camera through the mirror, and he says, I bet you thought I forgot about you. Right to the audience, because he was doing fourth wall narration all through the first season. This first episode, he didn't do any of it until that last moment. And he then immediately, it's so creepy, because now you're like, oh, this is the guy that we're messing with. He just killed a main character the first season. What's he going to do? And now he's calling out the audience, and he's like, get ready for this show. And so it was a great moment, great way to end that season. Season 2 was really strong to begin with, but it started off with a bang.
This has been on my list, one I want to watch. But yeah, so are we in on his plans the whole time? Are we like never really surprised by what he's doing with these fourth wall breaks?
His plans, he does a lot of improvisation. So we tend to be in on what he's attempting with certain things. And there's other things where it's the show don't tell sort of thing, where it's like, okay, what is he trying? What's he going for here? So sometimes we know, sometimes we don't. We just know that he is trying to buck the system, and it's fun to watch how he tries to do that.
Okay. And are we rooting for him or not? Or is it kind of like a Walter White situation?
It's a Walter White situation. You might not root for what he's doing, but you root for the chaos, because you want to. It's entertaining to watch the chaos. But there's no doubts about he's a bad guy. You know right away he is. Okay.
Well, that's a little bit different, because at Breaking Bad, at the very beginning, you're kind of rooting for him at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then, it becomes, It's funny. I just today saw a little clip of Bryan Cranston talking about Breaking Bad. He's like, yeah, we had that scene where I put the gun to my head that Jesse's holding. And so like, you really think that I could poison a child? You really think I could do that? And he was thinking, and I thought I didn't do it. And the next day we got the script. I'm like, oh crap, I did do it.
Oh man, I really acted well then.
Yeah. I suppose that's the best way. Give your actors. I mean, don't tell them that they're acting, and then they're good.
Yeah. When he had to do some scenes in the future for like specifically to start off the final season in the episode Live Free or Die. One of the first things we see is a future of Bryan Cranston or Walter White. And so they didn't give him a lot of details of what his plan is or what was going on. But Bryan wanted to ask the one question that he got an answer to was, is the cancer back? And Vince Gilligan was like, maybe. And so he played it like his cancer diagnosis, which is the case. He does know that it comes back, and so that was it. That was the only thing that he knew about what had happened in the future when he's filming those scenes.
Yeah, and similar, like I wonder how early, like because at the end of season 5 and Lost, when Locke on the island from that point on is playing the smoke monster as Locke. Mm-hmm. Did Terry O'Quinn know from that point on that he wasn't Locke, or did he think he came back to life?
No idea. I know that some of these times, these shows, like when they have big twists like this, they don't even tell the actors. Like kind of what you said with Bryan Cranston, but like Anthony Hopkins complained about it in Westworld season 1. He didn't have any script. His stuff was removed from some more like A plot stuff, and so he didn't ever see anything that was going on in the A plot, even though it affected what like his character was doing too. So he's kind of like, how am I supposed to act like this? And so he actually was fed up with the limited amount that he was given.
That makes sense. All right, I got a kind of a surprising pick.
Okay.
It's a show we both like, How I Met Your Mother. I'm going to go with season 7, The Best Man. So that show is still, at that point, it hasn't gotten to the territory where it turns yet. Season 7 is a really interesting episode. It's called The Best Man, because for one thing, it sets up a future of Ted being a best man, and you don't know who he's being the best man to. And he's doing the best man speech, and that's eventually going to be, I believe, that's going to be for Barney and Robin's wedding. And in the present day, it's kind of like one of those things where you're telling the story, and then like the camera like freezes, like you're never going to believe what's going to happen next, and that's at Punchy's wedding, where there's a lot happening. You have the big dance number between Barney and Robin where they burst out. You have Lily hiding the fact that she's pregnant, and then all of a sudden finding out that Ted's friend Punchy's wife is also pregnant. It's just a lot of humor happening, and it also kind of sets the stage for the last era of the show. Even though, taking season 9 out of the mix, it was still a really good. I think this is a really good season and a really good opener to it.
Yeah. One thing that I like that they did, I know that the writers are like, we wrote ourselves in a corner. We didn't like that we wrote ourselves in a corner. And they said that even as early as like season 1 or 2, where it's like the pineapple incident episode, whichever season that is, where they're like, we started off with the incident, and then we realized we wrote ourselves in a corner. Like, well, how do we explain what the incident, and like trying to figure that out. And they're like, we don't want to do that again. But yet they actually continually did that throughout the course of the series. But there are sometimes I really liked when they would play with timelines. It would be fun to see some of these future things and some stuff that they're heading to, because like I think the first time they realized they're going to commit to kind of like, let's feed a little bit of the future to them time at a time, was when they referenced the yellow umbrella in like season 3 or 4, when like, kids, you've already known the story about the yellow umbrella, even though this is the first we'd ever heard of it.
Yeah.
So I like that they started with this, because we knew that it was Barney's wedding, but we didn't know who the bride was. And so that was super interesting. I actually don't remember too much, sadly, to comment on the Punchy's wedding part and all the stuff that happened there.
Well, I'm trying to remember a little bit. I remember I liked the season a lot. And this is another one I was looking up. Oh, when was this? This wasn't too long ago. It was 2011. I was like, okay, that wasn't
13 years. That's fine.
Yeah. Like, kids who were born that year are teenagers now.
Stop it. My son was born in 2011.
Is that your oldest?
Yep.
Yeah, so you had one kid. Now you have 4.
Yes. And yeah, he's going to be 13 when this airs, he'll be 13 in a month.
Okay. Yeah, but it's this friend of Ted's who had appeared a couple times. And what I remember, there's the thing where we didn't realize at first that Lily was pregnant, and like a little bit towards the episode, Marshall was really drunk. And the thing was like, oh, how did Marshall ruin the wedding, and it kept, now it's not here. Like someone threw a football,
oh, that's right,
hit the bride, and then all of a sudden someone caught it as nothing. Then you realize that the reason Marshall was so drunk was because earlier when they were doing shots, like Lily was sneaking him her shots because no one knew that she was pregnant yet. And so he was drinking for two all night. And then at the end it came where I think Marshall somehow outed the fact that the bride was pregnant.
Yeah, I do remember that now, where like he was saying Lily was pregnant, but they thought that she was talking about the bride.
Yeah, and
then she fesses up that she is pregnant.
Yes, and then the bride's parents were all like, "What? You're pregnant?" Blah, and hilarity ensues.
Hilarity. I'm remembering that now as you're talking about it. One of my favorite Punchy moments is, I can't even remember what was going on in the episode, but I remember like towards the middle of the episode, it was talking about like how you treat your old friends and like how you act around old friends of yours.
Yeah.
So like to prove a point in front of Robin, because they're kind of fighting, Ted calls up Punchy, and then they act like the stupid idiots that they are, and then hang up like, Punchy, Ted, what was me? And like back and forth, and they hang up. It's like a 20-second phone call. But then we get to the end of the episode, and we see it from Punchy's point of view. And after he hangs up, his wife's like, "Oh, who's that?" It's like, "Oh, it's Ted. I think I got to get going. Ted needs me." And so like he was able to read in that stupid conversation that Ted was going through something, and he got in a plane to come out and meet Ted. I thought that was just a hilarious moment and a very realistic depiction of how guys can communicate.
Yeah.
100%. So
do you have a Punchy? Do you have an old friend that you revert to when you see them again?
I don't know how much I revert with anyone. 'Cause I've been stupid all my life, and I don't plan on changing that anytime soon. But I don't think there's anyone that like I act the way that I used to, you know. I don't think I've got someone that way. But at the same time, most people are tone deaf to it. I don't think I am, but you're probably tone deaf to yourself. So
I'm just kind of a awkward nerd all the time. Like it doesn't change. Like you are probably you're in like the second generation of like what I call like my Bethel friends. Like the first generation would be like the ones I grew up with, and then you're in like the second group. But I'm pretty sure I act the same with everybody.
Yeah, you hear that, everyone? We have integrity. We act the same no matter what.
Yeah, so I'm not cool.
Deal with it.
I'm never cool. And also, it seems like it'd be too much pressure to be cool. Like I'm glad I'm not.
All right, I'm gonna cheat here, and I need you to tell me if you believe this is cheating, and if not, I can change my pick. But I said how Lost does a good job of starting off seasons. Another show that is just top notch. We've already talked about it a couple different times on this episode even, but Breaking Bad always does a good job of starting their season. But starting from season 4 on, every season started phenomenally. Season 4 with Box Cutter was a great episode. Season 5 with Live Free or Die was a great episode. But then they did a mid-season break. And so I did have the episode Blood Money, which is the 9th episode, technically the 9th episode of the 5th season, but there was like a year-long hiatus in between them. Would you count that? Can we count it? Is that all right?
Depends. What's the episode of coming back from break? Because if that's a good enough episode, then I'll pay it.
So season 5, when they came back from that year-long, let's get it right. It's a year-long break, which is the amount of time you need in between seasons. So when they came back from that break, it was after like the last scene before they went on the break was Hank sitting on the toilet and looking at the here's the Leaves and Grass book, and then sees the engraving from Gail Bedecker, and he pieces together Gail wrote that piece of evidence that he was thinking about to Walter White. Walter is Heisenberg. He finds out, and that's where we cut off the season before. And so when we come back to it, it starts immediately on that moment of he just figured out Walt is Heisenberg. And so Hank is like trying to figure out, what do I do with this white whale that I've been chasing all these years is my brother-in-law. And so the episode, Walt doesn't know anything. Walt doesn't know that Hank is wise to him. And so Hank immediately, because they were at like a dinner party with or a lunch party or whatever, Hank quickly dismisses. He's like, I'm sorry, gotta go and I gotta leave. And he gets in the car, takes Marie with him. He has a panic attack on the way home, drives off the road, crashes, and then he decides to like he needs to get his mind wrapped around this. So he starts working from home. He calls in sick. And he's like, but I need all these files. So he kind of sets up a residence in his garage because he doesn't want anyone to stumble across the fact that he's looking into his brother-in-law. And so he's checking all this stuff out in his garage. He's working through these files and trying to figure out what's his next move while Jesse is still reeling and falling apart from all this money of the kid that got shot in the desert. And, he's just got this guilt. So he's like throwing out money outside of his car and everything. And he's falling to pieces. But Walt is the one at the end of this episode, the last like 10 minutes of this episode are what seals it as just like the launching point for the rest of the season. Cause it's such a good, everything happens so fast after this. The end of the episode, Walt goes into the bathroom and looks and realizes that book is missing. The Leaves of Grass book is missing. Hank took it and he panics. And this is the showing, not telling. He goes out to the car and is like still like freaking out. He goes, looks under all the wheel wells because he knows Hank's MO. He knows how Hank does this. And he finds the tracker that Hank had him use for Gus when they were trying to track him like the season or two before that. And he's just like silently is just like throwing a fit, like, holy crap, he found out. And so Walt goes to Hank's house. He goes to the garage and he kind of fake, is just throwing it out there of like, what does he know? And he's talking to him and Hank shuts the garage before he continues talking. And they're just standing in there. And as the garage door is going down, what?
That's a moment you got to give us a moment to. Like Hank like says nothing. You can see like the look of anger and like disgust on his face. He just like slowly reaches out, hits the button, and waits for the whole garage door to close. It's just a really eerie moment.
Yeah. And so then the door is closed and Walt, because you know how Walt does with his like innocent act. Like Bryan Cranston does a really good job of always showing when Walt's in crap because he over explains. And so like he adds these unnecessary details and he like posits and like it's his manipulative side where he's acting like he's your friend, but he's not. He's just trying to save his own butt. And that facade goes away after the garage door closes. And so then Walt's just like, if you think that I am this person, and if you think truly that the person you're talking to is capable of all these things, then my best advice is to tread lightly. And he like changes it into like the menacing tone to deliver that final, like those last words. And the episode ends. It's like, that scene is fantastic. The whole episode's really good, but that scene is just like, what's going to happen? What are they going to do with this? There's the tension building all the way through, and the release of that tension is just top notch.
Because Walt never actually admits anything.
Yep.
He says, but you can tell, just like you said, from the tone and from the way they look at each other, from that point on, they're enemies. Like they both know it's Walt, and Walt knows that Hank knows.
Yeah, exactly. And Walt was trying to see, can I get away with it? Can I convince him? And it's a misunderstanding. It's a coincidence, whatever. And he sees Hank as resolute. And he's like, all right, got to threaten him.
Yeah. Throughout the series, you kind of like, at least for me, you go back and forth with like being rooting for Hank or being annoyed by Hank, because Hank can be just an annoying guy at different times. Yeah. But from that point on, it's like I feel like we're really on Hank's side, because Hank goes like, he tries to find out if Skylar knows anything. He legitimately tries to save Skylar and the kids from Walt, and he's being thwarted at every moment. And then when Skylar is backing up Walt, because at this point Skylar is in on it too.
Yeah,
and it's just because I mean, and even later on, he's partnering with Jesse and basically saying like, I don't care what I have to do. If I have to partner with Jesse, who he spent most of the series trying to like literally hunt Jesse, and now he's working with Jesse because that means taking down Walt. It becomes a really good dynamic.
It's just such good writing of all the different characters, but Hank is one of those, like, the writing is fantastic from the get-go, because early on, when they're trying to get you on Walt's side, they let Hank be a bit of a chauvinistic, like, jock type. You know, he's the guy that he was cool in school, and everyone thinks he's the S word. You know, they're all like, this guy is the best. And there's a lot of like we're busting balls. It's you know, we call it toxic masculinity now, and he has a lot of that in the early seasons. And then like he goes to Mexico, he sees all these DEA members get blown up from the Tortuga bomb, and like that resonates with him, and he starts this process where he's got PTSD from that point, and it immediately will give us a little bit like, oh, no one should have to deal with that PTSD. And then he gets shot by the twins, and he has that fight with them, and he survives it, and then you feel for him even more, and then he keeps trying to catch Walt and doing the right thing, and he's chasing after the truth when no one else is smart enough to do so, while Walt is getting more and more despicable. And so it's easy to be like, that heart of yours, like, I want to root for someone. Oh, let me root for the guy who's actually trying to make a difference and do the right thing no matter what it costs.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, I think chasing Heisenberg started out as just like, I want to prove that I'm the best for Hank, and then it became more and more personal, even before he found out it was Walt.
Yeah, probably the time when he chased Jesse down into the Bounder in the junk area. Yeah.
Found Tooth of accident.
No, not that time. When he discovered like their RV, and he discovered the meth lab, and then he was going to wait there, and they got the hospital to call, or it was Saul's assistant. She calls him about his wife, and they made it personal, and they like hit home where it's like something bad could happen to your wife. And of course, as a DEA agent, like knowing that your biggest rival is using your wife to get what they want, like that caused him to snap. That's where he beat up Jesse to an inch of his life and got suspended for it.
Because he knew that Jesse was involved, but he didn't have any proof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Good stuff. I love Breaking Bad, man. Guys, if you haven't watched it, then we've ruined everything for you, but it's such a good show.
Yeah.
All right, you got any more?
Well, I have one. It's kind of an honorable mention because I think this sets out a distinct shift in this show getting so much better. But the reason I'm not putting it as an official pick is I actually think the next episode, season 2, is the really good episode. And that's the season 3 opener of Parks and Rec, which is Go Big or Go Home, because I think Flu Season is the better episode, which is the next episode. Yeah.
Flu Season is like maybe a top 5 of the series. Yeah. It's super good.
Flu Season is an episode that we may eventually do a breakdown of on this episode. We just did a Parks and Rec once. We probably won't do Parks and Rec for a while, but that's one that would be on the short list to do one on.
There's like 3 or 4 lines in that episode alone that are just like some of the funniest of the series.
Yeah. The season opener itself is kind of just, it's okay. It's nothing, but it starts out the era of having Ben and Chris on the show, which drastically improves the show.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to even think what happens in the episode. The government, they come back from their shutdown. I know Ron and Andy are competing basketball coaches, and Tom is the jealous ref, making Andy's team win.
Yes.
Because Ron's dating Tom's ex-wife.
Yep. I like the Bobby Knight comparisons with Tom, or what's his name, with Ron. That's his name.
Yeah. But I don't even really remember what's going on with like Andy and April at that point, because I know they like each other, but they're not together yet.
Yeah.
And but so like that episode itself, it's kind of like, it's okay, but that starts out the best season of the show.
April, that she comes back from Venezuela with Eduardo.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe, isn't Eduardo also played by the same guy that Robin came back with in How I Met Your Mother? Isn't that the same guy?
It could be.
I'm gonna look that up because the guy basically it's the same exact like role that he played. That'd be too. I mean, honestly, that would be good trivia, but too late. I'm looking it up right now. Nope, it wasn't. So,
that's racist.
I knew you were going to say that.
Hey, I had it ready to go. If this was not going to be correct, you get called out. That's how it goes.
But yeah, I mean, the point is that that episode wasn't good enough to put on my list, but it starts out the season.
You know how all waitresses look alike.
Yeah.
That's a great season. I'll agree with your assessment. The episode isn't as good as other parts of the season, but overall the whole season is really good.
Yeah.
But like we said, season 3 of both Parks and Rec and Office are great. And Office is the better one. Sorry. I know we talked about this ad nauseum. We had a whole episode about it. And you were wrong.
You thought that we were going to agree. You even then like, we both agree. I'm like, nope, we don't.
Well, fine then. You know what? You know what I'm going to talk about? I'm going to talk about trivia. All right?
Well, then you do that.
Okay. Good time. All right. Well, last week we talked about Survivor Season 3. Another Season 3. Look at us. Season 3s all around. You get a Season 3 and you get a Season 3 and Firefly gets only one. And I was
going to think of what's the season that didn't get to Season 3.
So maybe someday we'll talk about Firefly, but
we already did once a long time ago.
Yeah, I think I gave you one episode, right? Is that how we did it?
Yeah, it was Firefly matched with you watching Fresh Prince, but that was like 4 years ago. We've been doing this podcast for a while.
That's all we need. You just need the one episode.
Yeah,
that's it.
All right.
What?
A Firefly or Fresh Prince?
Both.
Okay.
The freshest fly of Bell space. All right, so last week, I'm trying, man. I'm trying to get the trivia out. So we talked about Survivor Africa, and one of the big characters of that season was Lex. And so we were asking with Lex, what luxury item did Lex bring with them to Survivor Africa? And that was his son's baby shoes. Now, at that point, his kids were several years older than that. And so, it loses a little bit of the cuteness. But, I mean, as a parent, you still keep some things that your kids had from way back when. So it's just a nice little reminder of home.
But also seeing how Lex played the game, I could also definitely see him using that as like a political move. Like, look at me, I'm so sensitive. Like me, I'm a good guy.
Look at the baby shoes. Aren't your kids like 27? So... No, one of my kids has like this stuffed animal that they've had since they were like a baby, and they don't need it anymore. But I mean, we're never getting rid of that. We're gonna keep it until we die, because it's like that stuffed animal was synonymous with them for years. So,
yeah. One of the episodes that we both had was Gay Witch Hunt in season 3 of The Office, and
yes,
we said that part of the reason that this happened was that Oscar Nunez was going to be off the show for a little while. The question is, what was Oscar doing that he needed a temporary leave from being on The Office?
I had looked that up beforehand, so I do actually know the answer to this.
All right. Well, and our listeners will find out next time.
Find out next time. Speaking of characters needing to leave, and you brought up Parks and Rec, season 4 in London was a fantastic season opener.
Yeah.
That could have been on the list.
It could have been. By the way, that was season 6.
By 4, I mean 6, obviously.
Because I'm watching through season Parks and Rec right now, and I'm on season 5, and they haven't hit London yet.
Okay. Season 6. If you out there are like, why did that make him think of it? It's just because in season 6, like they filmed in London because Guardians of the Galaxy was filming in London. And so they did an episode there so they could get some work with Chris Pratt while he was there for Guardians. And so they did that special episode, and then that's why Chris Pratt's character, Andy, stayed in London for a couple episodes before coming back 4 or 5 episodes later.
To explain why he wasn't around, yeah.
Yep. And I love the joke that they did, of course, to explain his weight loss, because for a Marvel movie, you got to get a little bit better in shape.
Yeah.
And so the whole idea was Andy's when Ben sees Andy, is like, oh man, you're looking good. Did you lose some weight? It's like, yeah, I stopped drinking beer and I lost like 40 pounds. It's like, wow, how much beer were you drinking? I know, right? It's got to be like a lot.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, true. I mean, if you're a heavy beer drinker and you stop, that will cause you to lose weight. It won't turn you into Star-Lord, but
No, but they did also have a character from Guardians of the Galaxy, one of the Nova Corps, the like posh English guy. He was the one that Andy ends up sticking behind with. He was in Guardians of the Galaxy, and I'm sure that's the reason why he was in this episode too.
there was also an episode, I think, after where, to be funny, I forget what the context was because I haven't seen this episode in a long time. Andy ended up being pantsless. And the reason they did that is because they couldn't have Andy shirtless because they're like, okay, it would not be realistic for Andy to be this ripped. So you can't have Andy shirtless right now.
Yeah. We'll just CGI the flab on.
Yeah, you could do that. But yeah, they decided, we'll just have him be bottomless instead.
That's fair. So this trivia section was full of a lot of trivia. This is your second podcast episode. Second episode. I was going for like second drink like Pam, but it didn't really come out. So yeah, this was second episode.
I didn't get the reference until you explained it, which is the mark of a great reference.
Exactly. Well, to be fair, I realized after I said it, I'm like, that's not as easy to catch as my mind was.
How often do I get to be the one to make fun of somebody instead of the other way around? So I got to take advantage when
never.
Yeah.
Still, go ahead and try to make fun of me. So what happens?
You got a dumb head.
That's what happens. Is that you look like a fool.
I was recently listening to an old episode of ours, and in that episode, I told you I'm not a good improviser, and this just proved that I'm not a good improviser. Okay.
So all I got to do to make you look silly is just give you the rope to hang yourself with. Hey, Brian, go ahead and take it away. Okay, dumbhead. Good job, Brian.
Yeah.
Well, that's all we got time for today. Actually, we've got time for plenty more, but we're not going to take it because you're fine. Until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And we're reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.